We can't build up big wind farms in a town. It is all decentralized renewable energy production, most by solar panels. And of course, this decentralized production needs a distribution kit where they can fit on. Need a distribution kit that is made fit for the renewable future and does not rely on the old energy supply. And this is what Vattenfall stands for. Vattenfall stands for coal production, for nuclear, but not for the renewable one. So we didn't rely too much on Vattenfall, that they have an interest to foster this transition of the energy grid towards the new, the modern, the smart grid that is needed for the decentralized renewable energy production. Yeah, well, that's why I said just before that we were focusing also with our utility on the decentralized energy production within Berlin. And it is important to know that we don't want to just take our Vattenfall out of the game and establish our municipal energy utility as the new one. Of course, this will change, well, something it could change, but it should be a new form of utility. A utility that is more or less partner of the citizen, that is also working together with small cooperatives. Community energy production is one of the key parameters in the energy transition in Germany. And I think if we want to carry out the energy transition, we have the energy cooperatives in Germany as a big part. We think the public run municipal utilities are the other big player that has to develop. It's not developed yet. And of course they have to work together. And they're a good example also from other cities, where municipal utilities can foster also cooperative initiatives, helping them to install solar panels within the community on their houses. And that's the new form that we wanted to establish with our utility. Of course, our energy utility should ban, of course, coal and nuclear energy, only renewable energy. As said before, energy efficiency, energy consumption is a big issue, and we think that this issue can be more or less more reliable fulfilled by a public-owned utility, because the aim of a private company is making money, is making as much money as you can, because this is your interest. A public-run utility, idealistic talking, should have the interest of the citizens in their minds, and therefore also the consumption. The highest level is not as selling as much energy as possible, but also it's more reliable that they would also be interested in reducing the overall consumption. However, this is somehow theoretical, why we'll talk about the public control later on. And of course, as I said, the grid operator is also one of the key parameters, especially in just transforming the old grid, the stupid grid, into the smart grid that we need for a renewable future, for decentralized energy production. A really quite important question is the social dimension of the energy transition. Actually, people lobbying against the energy transition use this aspect to work, to find arguments against renewable energy, because they try to make a correlation between rising energy prices and rising percentage of renewable energy. However, if you look at the numbers and details, this is not true. It's more or less the increase in fossil fuels, especially also in coal, also in uranium, that rise more than the renewable, the energy price. Actually, of course, with the drop of the oil price, it's a bit different, but in general, the more or less more responsible, especially in Germany, for the rise of energy prices are the fossil fuels than the renewable. However, we have to solve, as a movement who is fighting for more renewables. We have to solve this problem, because there's a problem, of course. How can people, low-income people, afford also renewable energy? And we have to find answers. And we think, especially in Berlin, we have a high number of energy poverty. We are a poor city with a lot of low-income households. Last year, 18,000 households were switched off from the energy supply, 350,000 in Germany. This is a problem when people can't afford anymore to pay their energy bills. This is not only due to rising energy, it's also some other things, other stuff that the welfare state, the part for the energy is not rising with the inflation or something like that, or this more complex problem. However, we have to address that. And energy poverty in a city, and 18,000 households cut off from the energy supply, politicians and public can't look away. They have to take action. They need to find measures. How can we find ways that the households get not switched off? There are quite important, interesting things that we can learn from France, also from other German cities like Saarbrücken, but however, we have to address this question. And how can you, as public hand, address this question? Only if you have also a municipal energy utility. You can try to really counseling the people how to consume less energy. You can really try to look at tariffs to how can you, for example, for several parts of society offer cheaper energy. However, this is also the problem where we kept the social initiatives and ecological initiatives not always together, because environmental organizations always say you need a true price of energy, and so high energy prices have also an effect on energy consumption and energy efficiency. However, you need to find solution. The problem that we had due to the overall regulation, we couldn't write down something completely in our draft law. However, we were fighting for really social tariffs, we are fighting for not cutting off people from the energy supply. We are trying to find stuff that somehow some financial support, just if you have an old fridge that consumes a lot of energy, how we can replace it much more faster than with the welfare state it is possible. These are really in low income households, you have the most consuming household machines. All this stuff that we couldn't write down in the draft, but we tried to introduce in the campaign, but it's not that easy, but it's a big problem in Berlin. Coming to the last point, the public control, or democratic control of public utilities, and I want to start a bit broader, not especially with the Berlin case. What are key parameters of public control? As I said before, public-owned utility is not, by the way, developed utility than the private one. We also have private companies, like corporations own private companies, that do a good job. But especially just to, if we want to fulfill the public utilities, have to carry out all the ideas that we have formulated, we need to control them. And first of everything, control starts with transparency. Without transparency, there is no control. Absolutely, you have to know what is happening in the company in order to scandalize them, or how to do this. And the key parameter is the legal form of the company. So in Germany we have more or less 4 categories of forms. I think it must be in Czech Republic more or less the same. So we have public legal forms and we've got the private legal forms. The first one is called municipal owned. This is really very close to the state. Then we have the so-called public law institution. This says good to control by Parliament, is quite transparent, but has more or less more independent than a municipal-owned company form. Then, of course, you've got the private companies like limited or corporation, stock market oriented, and this really is hard stuff if you have a private company, especially if you've got a stock oriented company. Also, if it's municipal owned, there are different things that have to be taken into account. For example, we had cases in Hamburg when the former municipal run energy supply was stock oriented, and the politicians that were sitting in the administrative board couldn't talk about it, what's happening there, not even in Parliament. If they are at the administrative board, at the utility, they had to make all the decision for the well of the utility and not the wealth of the people. So means making much money is good for the utility, but bad for the citizen. But as a stock-oriented company, you have to act like that. So any welfare things, every social stuff or every ecological stuff that just costs more money and lowers the money that you can earn, you can't do that. So this is quite important, especially if you really new establish a utility, just to think first that it has an important effect on the control. What is the control that we are usually know from public run utility? The most common is called boards. However, the board has more or less an advisory character. The members are often representatives of different organizations or, moreover, of retired politicians. The members are often selected by political parties or the utility itself. So you decide who controls you. And however, usually don't have any effect. Sometimes they meet once or twice a year, just for an evening. Someone from the utility is talking that everything is